Hi, this is Palico Patch, and welcome to a vlog. It's my face. I don't do it very often. Find it easier to hide behind a little bit of gameplay footage of the most monotonous but intriguing game I have, which is a truck simulator of some sort. But I felt this update was something which I wanted to do face to face. I've probably put what would appear to be quite a dramatic title to this video, which is not clickbait. It's had a tough start to the year. Back on January the 3rd of this year, my little boy was born, Noah, and things didn't quite go according to plan. There was complications, which up until that point there was sort of no sort of hint that there was going to be any problems. It was I wouldn't say the perfect pregnancy. I'm sure my partner would argue that when it comes to morning sickness and whatnot. But up until that point, until he popped into the world, there were no major issues. He was going to be a big baby, but there was never any complications, nothing to worry about. My partner took 3 diabetes checks during the process, and they all came back as normal. So there was no sort of underlying issues when it came to that, and even up to the point of him coming into this world, heart rate, everything was fine. But when he came into this world, there was a problem. He popped in and he wasn't breathing, not by himself, and from what I gather from talking to midwives and people since, it's called birth shock, and it can happen to any baby, but it was quite substantial when it came to Noah. He got moved over to a cart, which, from what I gather, not ever been in this circumstance before, was pretty standard to have in the room. It wasn't just like any issues they thought might arise. It's always there, and he was taken over to there, and they struggled to intubate him, which is when you put the pipe down the throat to help them breathe. And they ended up having to give him chest compressions for 20-25 minutes until it just so happened that a more experienced anaesthetist was passing the room, came in and slipped a right size tube in first time, and they managed to stabilise him and take him off to the NICU, which is the neonatal intensive care unit. I watched my son being worked on for 20 minutes, chest compressions, the mask they put forcing air into his lungs, and from what we've read of the notes since, he was trying to breathe for himself, but for whatever reason there was an issue there. Generally speaking, when a baby is born, you get about 5 to 8 minutes of them not having to breathe before there's an issue with the brain, and the fact that they didn't intubate him and get him stabilized for over 25 minutes meant that there were additional precautions which had to be carried out in order to minimize any damage which would have happened during that time period. So they started something which was called cooling therapy. Effectively, what that was to do was to cool the body down from its regular around 37.5 degrees to 33.5 degrees to stop any further damage which could happen to the brain. Unbeknownst to me, and I'm sure a lot of people, when the brain is being starved of oxygen, it obviously prioritizes where that oxygen needs to be, most notably the brain and the heart, and everything else gets sort of put to the wayside. But when it gets to the point where the oxygen is running out, brain cells start to die. And when brain cells die, as with any other cell in your body, all the neighboring cells rush to help it and try and sort of get it past whatever issues it's having. But what's unique to the brain is when the brain cell dies, it lets out a chemical which tells all the cells around it to die as well. The brain is the one organ in the body which, when a cell dies, it's dead. There's no coming back from that. What is done is done. So what the midwives were doing was to cool the body to the point where that process slowed until it got to the point where the body didn't think it was under attack anymore, and therefore stopped sending out these signals for cells to die effectively. So he was cooled down, or the process was started in our hometown at around 2 o'clock. And then we were transported to a specialist care centre in Birmingham, which is about 25 miles away, about an hour journey. And yeah, he went over to the Heartlands in Birmingham and was looked after there very, very, very well, very thorough. Couldn't have asked for any better people to be with under the circumstances. But yeah, just there was a point where he was born, and he was over there. And he's being worked on, and they're generally when they're born, they're a bit purple anyway. But his arm flopped out, and he was just blue, and that's something which will stick with me for the rest of my life. Sure. But he went over to the NICU. He was transported in a critical care ambulance. I went with him. Taking into consideration this was our second, so we'd only packed for 24 hours. We thought we'd be in and out. No quibbles, no qualms. You know, sort of get the job done and be back home. We left my son, my older son, with his grandma in the middle of the night. He didn't even know where we went because the contraction started in the middle of the night. And next thing I know is we're up in Birmingham. Well, I'm up in Birmingham. My partner was had borderline sepsis, so she was kept behind for 24 hours, which was really painful for her. She just wanted to be with a newborn and me, and support us, and in turn support her. But yeah, the calling process started. I'm going to give you a general overview of what happened, and then obviously, as I'm sure you can tell, this is the reason why I haven't been around for the past month, and how this will be affecting the channel going forward. So he was given the calling process because it's very uncomfortable to be kept at such a low temperature for a newborn. He was put on the maximum amount of morphine that he could be given for his size. Although a big size for a baby, it was obviously something which they don't want to do unless they have to. And within the first 24 hours, they said to expect seizures, which we did have. We had 2 seizures in the first 12 hours. It was about. So at that point, he was given anti-seizure medicine just to relax his body even more so it wouldn't affect him any more than it should do. So at that point, he was monitored, and it was just a waiting game at that point. After 24 hours, my partner came over. She was dropped off by her sister, and we basically had a vigil for 5 days next to him, sleeping for 3.5 hours a day, and just being there and just trying to comfort him. He was having shakes. I wouldn't call them seizures. I'd call them shakes. It got to the point where one of the more seasoned consultants said, "Yeah, he's just cold. He's shaking because he's cold. It's not a seizure." And at this point, he had probes in his head. He was on a ventilator because he couldn't breathe himself from all the morphine he was on. He had tube inputs into his belly through his umbilical cord, which was cut off. Feeding tubes, all sorts. I'll put some pictures up in this and just show you what it was like going through as I'm talking. Things move on and things change, and I'll show you the progress. But it's something you read about, you see on TV, you see these programs you never thought you'd be in. And from my perspective, from what would appear to have been just a standard pregnancy, a standard delivery up to the point of him coming out, it's not something which I was mentally prepared for, and admittedly I shut down. I didn't speak for about 4 or 5 hours after it happened. I saw stuff which my partner thankfully didn't see because I was stood up and she was on the bed being looked after. It changes you. It changes you. So he went through the cooling process, and after those initial seizures, everything appeared to be okay. He hit milestones a lot sooner than everyone expected him to. He was I was watching the ventilator, sort of, it puts up like a sine wave of when the ventilator's breathing for him. And every so often, because it was in blue, a little brown one came up. And brown for me is a bad colour. It's like red. It's not a good colour to have on any sort of medical graph. And I asked the midwife what it was, and they said that was him trying to breathe for himself. So the consultant came around and on the Friday night decided they would take him off the morphine, so he had enough about him to be able to start breathing for himself for when the warming period started, which was a process of over 8 hours, taking his temperature back up to where it should be. And by 6:20 on Saturday morning, he was actually tugging at his ventilator and pulled it out, so he was breathing for himself way before they expected him to. And it was that point we thought that we've got a good chance of getting out of here with minimal impact. So the warming process started. No more seizures were noted, and he had a lot of the tubes taken off him. And then we were also able to start feeding him at that point through his feeding tube. And for the first 3 days, he didn't eat at all. He didn't have anything. No, other than fluids through a cannula. There was nothing into his body. And it was the start of what at the time felt like a very long journey, but taking into consideration how quickly he's hit milestones, it's I feel blessed to be in the position we are right now. He's within the 24 hours of being taken off the ventilator and being warmed up, he was able to be breastfed, which he took to like a champ, which is good to see. And since then, he's hit all the milestones he should have a lot sooner. From what I gather from talking to the specialist midwives at Heartlands, this is the sort of thing which can take up to sort of 10 days to 2 weeks to sort of get to where he was, which he was able to knock out in 5 days. So that was another big positive for us. And at that point, that they wanted to just check everything, make sure everything's okay. He had an internal scan, ultrasound, just checking all his organs, and there is a bit of damage to his heart. There's a few microscopic holes, which the consultant was confident was going to heal up due to them being so small that the muscle would just fill them in essentially, but that they were caused due to the chest compressions he had for so long. And initial thoughts were there was no issues from an ultrasound with his brain. There's no shadows or anything they could detect, which was a good thing too. But before we left, they wanted to give him an MRI scan. Now, sadly, he was not happy about being transported from one building to the other in January in just a nappy with some very basic covers put over him. And they could have done it by sedating him, but at that point, there was nothing more that Heartlands could do. So they wanted to just get him back to our hometown to be looked after and monitored. And also, they had the capacity to do MRI scans there as well. So it was no point in taking up a space which could be used for someone who needed it a lot more than we did at that point. So we got transported back after 5 days. And we were back at our hometown hospital for 3 days, 3.5 days before we were released and got to go home. So the first 8 days of his life, we were in and out of hospital. Now, at that time, as I said, I've got an older son who, if you've been long-term viewer of mine, you would have seen that he came under special circumstances as well. If not, I implore you to go and check out those videos. I'm not going to link it; you can find it yourself. But from disappearing on the Tuesday night, we didn't actually see him until the Sunday, and we had to explain to him from his point of view, there'd been no problems to you suddenly have a special brother. So you have to make him aware that in the future that he may need more attention and more specialist care than a normal baby. And that was quite difficult to obviously make a 5-year try and understand. We were exhausted as well, but he took it all in good stead. But he was more upset with the fact that we just disappeared one night and we didn't see him we didn't see him till Sunday, so it's a long time. And on the Monday, he was starting school again after the Christmas period, so it was a big sort of upending for him as well. So when we got back to our hometown, we just wanted to sort of establish that routine again. So, although we were offered a family suite, because we only live 5 minutes away from the hospital, we decided to go home and yeah, just try and give him that sort of normality that we could. With that being said, my partner was still, once we had a boys' night downstairs and he fell asleep downstairs, my partner was going back to hospital and spending the night there just to make sure that our little one was still being able to be breastfed. As long as he was feeding naturally, they were more willing to let him go early. So that's what we had to do. We had, she was up and down those 3 days. It was tiring, but ultimately we were just focused on the end goal, which was to get little Noah back home as soon as possible. And since then, he's had an MRI scan, and initial results are good. They couldn't see anything majorly wrong, and there was a little bit of movement. So they like to keep the head as still as possible, but obviously with a baby that's difficult. And now we're just waiting to hear back from the specialist to see if there's any sort of issues we might have to deal with in the future. But at this point, it's just a case of watching developmental milestones and hoping that he meets them as and when. As a baby, he's doing good. There's no problems there. I mean, if you didn't know about the first 8 days of his life, you wouldn't have thought there was anything wrong with him. He just comes across as a regular baby, but it does make you hypersensitive to anything he does, which I wouldn't say is unusual because obviously all babies develop differently. But in his sleep initially, he was having a lot of shakes. Didn't look like he was in pain like it was a seizure, but did have a lot of shakes. Usually you just think, oh, that's just the baby just sort of developing his brain and you know, he's just making connections there in his sleep, and obviously they sleep a lot. But under the circumstances, it makes you think then, oh well, is that an issue? Is that a seizure? Is that something to be aware of? Is that something to be worried about? And there has been a lot of sort of hypersensitivity from both myself and my partner in regards to little things like that, which usually you just brush off and go, oh, that's just a baby being a baby. But yeah, it's been exhausting. But we're home now. I mean, I'm recording this the last few days of January. I'll probably put this up next Monday. But it does make you want to refocus your attentions elsewhere. Now, I did have high hopes when it came to the YouTube channel to be able to sort of pick up the workflow. I am very aware that I've been phoning it in over the past couple of years, especially since my bigger son's been born. It's very difficult from a time perspective when you've got a full-time job and a family life to be able to fit this sort of thing in. And it's definitely not where I wanted to be from a Let's Play perspective. I wanted to be a lot more, have a lot more series running, carry on my patch play. So I like playing the individual games, but it's difficult. And I think under the circumstances, it's not something which I can continue to do, and be happy with what I'm doing on the channel, under the current circumstances with my young boy. So my plan for the foreseeable is I'm going to be finishing off the 2 series I've got. I've got a bit of time. I've got 4 months off work, which was standard anyway. Very, very lucky for that. I'm already a month in. I haven't really done anything other than just enjoy the family life. And I say have a quiet time at home, but with the follow-up appointments we've had and family wanting to come over and see us, we've had like 1 or 2 quiet days in a month, which is ridiculous. But we're getting to the point now where we should be able to get a bit of more quiet time in. And then I'm going to have a good think about what I want to do. I'm not giving up YouTube, but I think the channel in its current format is going to come to an end. I don't feel like I'm doing it or myself justice. I have ideas and I just can't implement them because I don't have the time. And if it means that I've got to drop doing something on a regular perspective, i.e. once a week or twice a week, and I maybe put out a quality thing every 3 to 4 weeks, then I think going forward, that's what I'm going to do. And that takes the pressure off me. I don't feel like I've got to put something out every week. I can put it out when it's ready, but know when it is ready that it is going to be a quality end product, as opposed to, again, something I'm just phoning in, something I'm just winging, just to have something there to keep viewers viewing I'm gonna miss it in a way. One reason I started up this channel, other than initially trying to find indie gems, which I've had a fair bit of success about. I mean, it's not many people who can say that they're in a computer game, and especially to have a commission. I've featured on the Steam front page of Curious Expedition 2. Never thought I'd be able to do that. I've been very lucky for that, and I'd like to thank everyone at Mashing the Mensch for giving me that opportunity. I think it's just time to move on. Time to focus on something else. As I said, this is my creative output. I'm not going to end this, but as far as what I'm doing right now is concerned, I think I'm done. I mean, I've had a good sort of 10 years of it, on and off. And I've got ideas, more sort of documentary style. But yeah, I think this is it for my current setup. But as I said, I am a stickler for when people I watch end series, which I'm enjoying prematurely. So I am going to see out these two series I'm currently doing now. And it's not to say that I might not do patch plays in the future if I find the odd random game where I could get an episode out of, but from a sort of regular schedule perspective, just to take the pressure off me and be able to refocus my attentions where they're needed right now, which I'm sure you can appreciate. It's probably best just to hit on the head and move on. But I felt like I owed this to you. I hate it when people I watch just disappear with no sort of rhyme or reason, especially people you enjoy watching and they give up and not say anything. And again, mitigating circumstances meant that I've had to do this video now and tell you what's been going on. But yeah, my focus needs to be elsewhere for the moment. So the usual stuff will continue whilst I've got the time to do it. But then when the time is right and things have been put to bed properly here, then there'll be another follow-up video, and we can openly discuss what lies ahead for Palico Patch as a channel. But for now, thank you for watching. As always, a like is appreciated. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.